already started to rout and sprout, to sprout and root. So I have just got back from Tesco, and when I was by the counter about to pay for my shopping, I saw this very sad looking calathea. As you can see, it's got a very crisped up leaf here, and it's still in its plastic, but just superficially it doesn't look great. And this one was listed at being £12, and I just said to the guy by the checkout, this plant's obviously not looking great, would you let it go for a better price? And bless him, he gave it to me for £2, which I think, including the basket as well, I think is pretty good considering I think it probably looks worse than it actually is. And I did, take it out, I did have a quick scan as much as I could in the plastic for pests when I was there. Oh, look how sad that is, poor thing. But I couldn't see anything. That doesn't mean that there is nothing, but I can't see anything from first look. But it is bone dry, and calatheas don't like to dry out, and they do tend to be very dramatic plants. Granted, this one I would have thought probably should have been watered through about a week ago, but the first thing I'm going to do now, and then I will reevaluate the plant situation tomorrow when I am doing the rest of this video, but the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get this plant into the shower and I'm going to give it a thorough soak through. I'm going to give its leaves a spritz down. And then, yeah, I will see you in just one moment. We'll come back to it tomorrow and see what it's looking like then. Hello everyone, it is now the next day and I'm back to commence some pretty major plant rehabbing. I will talk you through everything in a moment, but what I thought I would do with today's video is I would take you through everything I'm going to do in order to get my supermarket plants to hopefully bounce back to health. And then I've also come across another plant in my collection, which, oh my goodness, is really not looking good at all. So I thought I would take you through a little bit of rehabbing on that one as well. And then finally, I've got some exciting things going on in my collection. So I wanted to just give you a couple of updates too. So it's going to just be a little bit of a mishmash of everything, but hopefully it will be enjoyable. But first, if you're new here, hi, my name's Claire and this is Yoli. I make videos all about houseplant care, sharing tips and tricks I've learned over the years to help keep your plants happy and healthy. And so yeah, if you've got plant stuff to do as well, then feel free to grab some plants, do it along with me. We can do some plant chores together. And yeah, I hope you enjoy it. Let's get into it. So really quickly before I show you what the plant's looking like now, I just want to say I have just hit 100,000 subscribers here on YouTube, which is like insane. It's absolutely crazy. And I just wanted to say thank you to you guys, like whether you've watched my videos, subscribed, obviously, liked, commented, whatever you have done. It's helped me get to this point, and it's just nice to know that lots of hard work is paying off and people are enjoying my videos. So yeah, thank you so much. It has honestly, these last few days have just, I've been on such a high. So yeah, thank you. But the plant. So I was kind of hoping, to be honest, that it might be looking a little bit perkier today. This is what it's looking like. And as you can see, some of its leaves have slightly uncurled. It's looking a little bit better in some areas, but it's still very droopy and not looking particularly well on top of the plant. And I actually wasn't quite sure what type of calathea this was. Looking at the structure of its leaves, I was sure it was a Calathea roseo-picta, but I know there are quite a lot of different types of roseo-picta. And I think from the research that I've done, this one's a crimson green, which basically looks quite a lot like a Calathea tanja and a Calathea rosy. Because as you can see, some of its leaves are very pink and some are very kind of, I don't know, kind of bluey silvery green, and it's gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous. But the first thing I can see is that a lot of its leaves, and in fact I'll chop this one to show you, around the base of the stem have actually started rotting, and that makes me think that I need to get in there straight away and take a look at the roots. And I know sometimes I say when I do bring a new plant home, the last thing that I think about initially is repotting, because I want to try and make the transition nice and gradual. However, all of the things that I typically and usually do to acclimate a plant kind of go out the window a little bit when I'm working with a plant like this, because this plant is in absolute survival mode at the moment. It's on the verge of not bouncing back. So under circumstances like this, I don't wait and I just get in there and I try to do everything I can as quickly as possible. So just looking at the substrate that this one's in, I'm not sure how you'll be able to see until I actually start getting it out of its pot, but it looks like just kind of a bog standard coir mix that's very often used with, I was going to say like garden centre plants, like plants that are pumped out very, very quickly and don't always go to specialised shops. I know places like supermarkets, I'm not saying always, but typically here in the UK don't take that much pride in their plants in the same way as specialist houseplant shops. They do cut corners in certain areas, and often that does mean that the substrate they're grown in isn't optimum for the plant. It's not nutritious enough, it doesn't retain water, it's not well draining, and that is what I'm guessing just from looking at this one. So I'm gonna start by getting it out of its pot. Oh, okay. This is positive just starting off. So if you look at this root system here, it actually looks pretty full and healthy, and that's always what you want to look for when you are looking for a healthy plant. A healthy plant starts with healthy roots, so this is a really good thing. But one thing that I do feel, just even from picking it up and showing you it there, is that actually it's probably in a little bit too much soil for the plant. It doesn't feel like the root system is big enough for this much, and often when that happens, a root system can get overwhelmed quite easily. So my guess as to what might have happened here, besides the fact that the plant has obviously just been allowed to go completely bone dry, is that it was potted up and probably shipped overseas. It hasn't been that warm here in the UK, so the plant was probably going through a period of adjustment in that sense, and then going from being soaking wet and the root system potentially quite overwhelmed with the amount of moisture, it then has been allowed to just go completely bone dry. And so it's kind of no wonder this plant isn't looking great. Also, calatheas are a type of plant that really enjoy a very humid environment and quite a warm environment. And when I was in Tesco yesterday, it was definitely not warm, and I don't exactly know what the humidity levels were, but not, let's just say not ideal for plants. So the good thing about having given it a water through last night is that the substrate is actually coming away from the root system really nicely. I'm not having to break it up too much, because sometimes if you start trying to break away the substrate, like if I tried to do it yesterday, I would have been much more likely to lose quite a lot of the root system, because it probably would have been more brittle and not as flexible. Whereas here, it is coming away really nicely. Oh, and that's exciting. I can see a couple of new little growth points just starting to come up there. So even if, and I don't think I will, but even if I do need to chop the plant right back, that gives me a lot of hope that this plant is going to be absolutely fine. And if you watch my other videos, you'll know that typically I'm not the biggest fan of really colourful houseplants. I don't know why, just sometimes I think because I've got a lot of plants in my space, if I have lots of like bright colours as well, it can feel a little bit jarring for me. But this one, as I say, I think because it's not just very pink, it has got a lovely balance, I feel like I could definitely get on board with. And Ross is a massive fan of colourful plants, so I think he will very much appreciate this one. He hasn't been able to see it in all its glory yet. He just went to get into the shower this morning and was like, why is there a plant in there? Which is pretty standard in this house. But yeah, I think hopefully once it's back to health, it's going to look absolutely gorgeous. And the other thing that I would say is, under normal circumstances, I wouldn't be bothering to get all of the substrate off the roots. I'd probably just leave it like that, and I'd go in and I'd repot. And I can't remember if I actually said this in the video, or if I've just thought it in the lead up to filming this. But I'm planning on getting this plant into semi-hydroponics today, just because I've had a lot of success growing calathea in that way. I feel like it just feels like a good gut decision for this plant. So whenever you are transferring a plant from any organic matter, whether it's moss, soil, whatever it is you're using, into semi-hydro, you do just need to make sure you get pretty much, oh no, not all of it off, but as much as you possibly can, just because if you don't get the old substrate off, and you've got organic matter clinging to the roots of a plant and then it goes into semi-hydro, it does just make the plant much more susceptible to root rot. And this plant is battling a lot already. I want to try and keep the risk of it encountering more issues as low as possible. So yeah, I'm trying to do things properly for the plant. So I'm going to just try and get as much as I can off here at the table, and then what I'll probably do is take this one back into the shower and just give its roots a little blitz off. If you have got an outdoor tap, I would 100% recommend doing this outside, but I am not currently blessed with an outdoor tap. So for the time being, we will be using the shower. I was going to say as well, it just goes to show that you should absolutely ask. If you see a plant that's not looking particularly healthy and you want to get it for a little bit less money, I don't think it's cheeky at all to ask. I know so many plants are just thrown away because people think, oh, well, it doesn't look perfect anymore, we can't get the money for it, and they will just go in the bin, and that absolutely breaks my heart. As I say, I have all the faith that this plant is going to bounce back and be beautiful and healthy and hopefully have a lovely long life. So yeah, if you do see a plant that's looking sad, the worst someone can say is no. Absolutely ask. And that way you can get lots more plants for cheaper. And fewer plants die as well, so it's a win-win. Okay, so I've got as much as I possibly can here at the table off the roots, and that's what I'm left with. It's got a really, really decent root system. And if I did notice that the roots had started to rot, for example, this is the point where I would do a bit of a trim back. But from what I can see here, all of the roots actually miraculously look pretty healthy. Before I take it through to the shower though, I am just going to give it a little prune back. And there's a lot of leaves that don't need pruning back. But just looking at some of the snapped stems, like there, for example, snapped stems are not going to unsnap themselves. So things like that, all they do is make the plant more susceptible to rotting. So I am just going to give it a really good trim back. And also just by giving these unhealthy bits of trim back, it just allows your plant to pump all of its energy into healthy new growth, as opposed to trying to save growth that is essentially not going to be savable. So really, although it might be sad to lose some lovely leaves, it is the right thing to do. You've got to be brutal to bring out the best in your plants sometimes. And calatheas typically are quite fast growing once they get going in an environment that they're happy. So I would have thought, although it's a little bit sad doing this at the moment, I would have thought in the next few weeks I will be getting some lovely growth from this plant. We'll come back to it and we'll have a look at it and see how it's getting on. Okay. So I think that's a pretty good starting point. I think most of what I'm left with there, although it's very floppy still, is fairly healthy growth. So yeah, let's take it through to the shower and give these roots a really good rinse off. So there we go, that is now what the roots are looking like. As you can see, although not all of the soil is off them, about 99% is. And to be honest, you're never gonna get all of the soil off. And if you do, in my experience, you risk damaging the root system, and I don't want to do that at all. So I'm happy with this. I think that is more than enough soil off in order to go into semi-hydro. And as I say, semi-hydro is just a choice that I, as the grower, am making. You don't have to put your plants into semi-hydro. I just have found that calathea does respond very well to it. Also, if you're not familiar with semi-hydro, there's lots of different semi-hydroponic mediums that you can use. And semi-hydro basically just means exactly what I've just said, semi-hydroponic, not completely water, not completely hydroponic. The stuff that I like to use looks like that. And Lechuza Pon they're probably like the best known brand for making the substrate. But the one that I'm actually using is by Soil Ninja, and I absolutely love Soil Ninja as a brand. I get all of my organic substrates from them as well. And it's basically just a combination of lava rock, pumice, zeolites, what else? Okay, it doesn't actually say on the bag, but it basically just creates a really lovely porous mix, meaning that your plants can absorb lots of oxygen as well as water. There's so many benefits to semi-hydroponic growing, and I've spoken about them in so many videos before, but for me, I just find it's really great to help regulate watering in plants. And Calathea is a type of plant that, as I've already mentioned, does enjoy quite a lot of moisture, but it is for that reason quite easy to overwater this plant, whereas if you use a semi-hydroponic mix, it just makes that a lot more difficult to do. That was very bad English, but I know what I mean. It makes it much harder to do. So what I'm going to do, I was debating going down a pot size because obviously the root system isn't huge, but I think I'm probably going to stick with roughly what it was in before. This is about 12 centimetres. And yeah, I think that will be a nice fit for this plant in semi-hydro. And before you use your semi-hydro, it's a really good idea to rinse it off. What I typically will do when it's a nice day, I'll take it out to the balcony and I'll just do a few flushes through to try and get the dust off it, because the dust can make your plants more susceptible to root rot. I've already done that and I've put it back into the bag, which, to be honest, kind of defeats the point because it does then create more dust as it rubs together. But I just know that it can, I was going to say block your drain, I say having just put soil in the bath. In my experience, soil is much easier to catch in one of those little grates that goes over the plug hole, whereas this, because the dust is very fine, it can block your pipes, and I only found out about that recently. So yeah, if you're able to do it outside, I would recommend doing it that way. But you essentially just use it when you're setting your plant up in it, very much like normal soil. So I'm just going to put a little layer at the bottom there, pop my plant in, spread its roots a little bit, and then pop the semi-hydro on top. But the thing that's very different about semi-hydro growing to soil growing is that you actually grow it with a reservoir. And I always say that if you're growing plants in soil, you should make sure that they've got good drainage. You should make sure that any excess water can kind of run off them every time you water. And with semi-hydroponic growing, it's essentially completely the opposite. You grow in a container that doesn't provide any drainage, and the plant will just absorb as much water as it needs. So as I say, for that reason, it does make it a very low maintenance way of growing plants. So yeah, what I think I'm probably going to be able to do, because that's now potted up, is I think I'm probably going to be able to use the little basket that it came in, because looking at this, it is plastic lined. So I can essentially create a reservoir of water in that. So what I will probably do is pop the little plant in there and then fill a water reservoir to around about there. It doesn't have to be completely specific. You just shouldn't let the water reservoir completely dry out. Your plant in its nursery pot will be able to absorb water, and it will essentially just soak up through the semi-hydro, and hopefully this plant should start to perk up. I know it's not looking amazing, but my God, is it looking better already than it was this time yesterday? So I would hope in the next kind of 24, 48 hours, all of its leaves should start to lift. I can see it's giving me some lovely growth. I'm hoping that's not going to be too disrupted. If it is, it is. This is just kind of setting the plant up for good things long term. So yeah, I will do an update on this plant in the next week or so, next couple of weeks, and I'll show you how it's getting on. The other thing, as I say, with Calatheas is they are humidity lovers. So what I will probably do, seeing as this is quite a big plant, I'm going to put this one right over next to my humidifier. So it's going to be lapping up kind of like 80% humidity. And just as the plant acclimates, that should be exactly what it needs in order to help it bounce back. So yeah, keep your fingers crossed for this plant. And as I say, I will absolutely let you know how it does. But then the other rehab plant that I wanted to look at, this is one that's been in my collection for quite a while, and it's another one that I absolutely adore. But I must say, I have had to do a similar thing to this plant in my time of owning it before. And this is my Alocasia sinuata, and it's such a beautiful alocasia. I've spoken about this one in lots and lots of videos because this one's actually, I think, completely extinct in its natural habitat. So it is purely cultivated in a home environment. And for that reason, every time I look at this plant, I'm like, oh my goodness, you need to make sure you are doing everything you can to keep this one happy, because it feels like a real privilege to own this plant, if that makes sense. There aren't more of this one growing wild. So not that I ever want any of my plants to die, but this is one that I feel I must protect even more. And again, I've been growing this one in semi-hydro. I've essentially been doing what I just said about creating a reservoir for that plant, but I just haven't been using drainage in this transparent container, and I've just been creating a reservoir around the bottom. It's quite useful with this because, as you can see, I'm just using an old cup, but it's got these little markers on it so I can kind of see where I need to fill my water to. And the last time I looked at this plant, it had started to rot, and I think that's probably just because some of the dust from the semi-hydro had started to build up, but also the mix that I'm using here, I'll pour a bit out so you can see, is a lot finer than the stuff I just showed you. And I believe this is actually Houseplant, the brand that I was talking about before. So I think what I'm gonna do, I'm going to empty out what's in there first, and I'm going to just have a look at the roots and see if there's anything else I need to do. I hope there's not. But I think what I would like to do today is transfer it to a chunkier semi-hydro mix like the one I just used for the Rehab Calathea. Again, just to allow some more oxygen to be around the roots. I also didn't fill its reservoir because I didn't want this to be super messy. Ooh. Okay, this is fairly positive actually. So this is what I'm looking at, and it's very rooty, and it all looks pretty healthy. I can also see some corms in here, which is really exciting. Oh my God, some big corms actually. Whoa. Ooh, I've never seen this before. How bizarre. It's like I've got a Siamese corm. I've got two that are just growing off each other. Have any of you ever seen that before? How unusual. Oh, how exciting. I don't know whether or not to separate them. Oh, I just did by accident, so that's how we're growing it. Cool, I will set them to one side and I will propagate them. I'll start the propagation process after this. Oh, there's another one as well. Oh my goodness, this is so exciting, and that one's actually sprouting. Oh, yay. Oh, I'm so happy I'm going to be able to get some more of this plant. So, looking at the roots, the one thing that I am seeing straight off the bat is that although it's got a lot of roots, a lot of them are very, very spindly. And often, although spindly roots aren't bad, you want to obviously encourage a lovely, full, healthy root system. Oh my goodness, loads of corms. Yeah, and if you look at the roots towards the top by the rhizome there, you can see they're quite full. And then they just start to get a little bit like fine and almost hair-like. So I think I'm just going to give them a very little trim back. I don't want to trim them back enough to send the plant into shock, but as I've said before, root pruning in plants, particularly with spindly roots, can actually be a really positive thing for your plant long term. Okay, I have noticed something that is likely why the plant isn't looking great at the moment. So it's okay because I've just felt it and there's things that can be done, but the rhizome, the bottom of the plant here, has actually started to rot. And this is the thing with alocasia. If you don't catch this quickly, your alocasia is going to go downhill so fast. It's even more difficult to treat than root rot, because if that spreads all the way up, there is no saving the plant. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a very clean, very sharp knife, and I'm going to have to just take some cuts to investigate how far up the rot has travelled. I think it should be fine. No need to panic yet. But yeah, I'm going to get a knife. For some reason, certain types of alocasia are just more prone to this, because I've got some alocasia in my collection that I have never experienced this with, and I've got others like this one that I've experienced this with multiple times over. As I say, this is the same issue that was happening with this plant, I think about 6 months ago. So yeah, right. Let's hope I don't need to do too much chopping. I think that was a pretty good cut. So I have chopped just above where I can see the rot just there. And if you look at the cut I've made, you can see that is nice and full, and it's not squishy, it's not sludgy. I'm just feeling it, and no rot has spread to that bit, which is really, really good news. But what I will probably do now, just to be on the safe side, is I'd like to leave that section to callus before, in fact, I'm just thinking, I could leave it to callus, but also I'd like the roots to still be retaining lots of moisture. So what I'm gonna do is I think I'm gonna put it into my chunky semi-hydro mix, but I'm just not gonna fill the reservoir very high initially, just so that, yeah, the section has a chance to callus a little bit. And in fact, I have actually got 2 sections of Alocasia sinuata here, trying to just divide the root system, which looks like it might be a bit of a nightmare. But yeah, I've got 2 sections here, so I could, in theory, grow them in different conditions. I've got one right at the top of my cabinet at the moment, and, oh, I'm sorry, this one's been right at the top of my cabinet, and I've kind of been thinking for a while, maybe that is just a little bit too much light for that plant. Don't get me wrong, it is a plant that really enjoys high levels of light, but it's right under my mother grow light. And that might be a little bit too much for it, so maybe I take this as an opportunity to have a play about. I'm not sure. Part of me is like, should I grow one in sphagnum moss or something? I mean, seeing as I've got 2 and I've got so many corms, why not? Why not have a play about? So, okay, I'm going to do exactly what I just said. I'm going to do 1 in semi-hydro and I'm going to do 1 in sphagnum moss, just because that feels like a good decision. I'm not, however, going to use the same container. I think I'm going to go in with maybe a jar or something. In fact, perhaps even the jar I've got here. Let's have a look at the containers I've got. Into the cupboard of chaos I go. Okay, so I've got a few containers, and I've also brought something over to propagate the corms in as well. But for semi-hydro, I'm going to go in with this one. This is plastic, but it's not like, I don't have to explain it. It's a much harder plastic, and I just get the impression it's going to be better. I don't know why. No rhyme behind my reason, but I just feel like it might do better things for the plant. See, I'm going to leave about that much at the bottom, and then I'm going to pot, I'm going to pot this section on top, just because it's got a slightly more substantial root system compared to that one. And before I do that, I am just going to take off any old brown dead leaves at the bottom here, because again, like I said about transferring anything from an organic matter, organic substrate, it just makes it a little bit more susceptible to rotting. And another sign that this plant might have potentially been a little bit too close to the grow light is that if you look at it from the side, you can see its leaves are kind of like ducking, like you can see that one's growing down. And a lot of the time that does happen when an alocasia is essentially a little bit overwhelmed with light. It will almost like duck to get out of the way. So I think I'm gonna probably keep this one in my cabinet, but not right at the top. I think maybe I'm gonna move it down to a lower level and see how it does that way. And again, with the reservoir for this one, I'll probably just keep it filled to about there with water. Oh, what's happening to my voice? And also I was going to say with alocasia, I do just use completely normal tap water. I use tap water for like 99% of my plants. The only ones that I don't are my carnivorous plants. And yeah, this one I'm going to do in sphagnum moss. And I think maybe just in this jar, it's a little bit sticky where the label was, but I can always scrub that off afterwards. But I was going to say, I've been getting lots and lots and lots of questions over this last kind of like 5 or 6 days, because I did an episode of BBC Gardener's World, which, oh my goodness, I'm so excited finally to be able to talk about it, but it was such a pleasure to be involved in. We filmed it almost a year ago, so a lot had changed in my collection from filming it to when it aired, which was just before the Easter weekend. So yeah, I've kind of connected with a few people because of that. And then also over on Instagram, I made a reel and my reel went viral. It's had like 3 million views in about 4 days. So I've suddenly had lots of people kind of come over to my Instagram and start chatting and asking questions. And it's just kind of prompted a few topics of conversation that I feel like maybe I nowadays just kind of glaze over in my videos, things that people want to know, but I just think because I've mentioned them in older videos, people know, if that makes sense. And I think things such as growing in semi-hydro and transferring to different substrates and stuff like that, I think that definitely falls into that category. And it's absolutely not something that you should know. Like, I am still learning about it myself. There's lots that I don't know, but I'm gonna actively try to kind of walk you through things a little bit more, because I want to make sure that everyone feels like I'm answering all of the questions, if that makes sense. Also, on that note, if you've ever got comments or questions or anything that you want answering, do just drop me a comment down below one of my videos. I often, what I'll do is, like, even if I don't get around to replying to you personally, I will make a note of them and I'll be like, right, that is something to cover in the next video, and I'll find a way to just kind of slip it into conversation or answer questions that way. So yeah, please do let me know. Also, while I'm talking about things, I have got a Patreon, which is linked down below this video, and I do a Plant Doctor forum over there where I go through plant questions and all that sort of stuff. So if you want more of an intense response, that's not the right way of saying it. If you want more of an in-depth, that's what I'm trying to say, a more of an in-depth response and a quicker response as well, then by all means join my Patreon. But no pressure either. So yes, right. That is potted as well, and again, as you can see, its leaves are just ducking a little bit, just a little bit. So I think I'll probably start this one in the cabinets because I don't want to change too much in one go. But then I might try and acclimate this one to just normal room conditions. I don't see why it wouldn't do well. And I'd like to just try a few different things with this plant. So yeah, I think that is probably what I'll do. And again, similarly to the reservoir for this one in semi-hydro, with sphagnum moss, what I typically do, if I feel the moss is starting to become a little bit dry, I'll just put like 1 centimetre of water at the bottom, and typically that will just rehydrate the moss all the way up. Yeah, so that is what I'm going to do for those ones. But the corms, so I do corms in quite a few different ways, but I can see some of these ones have already started to sprout and root. So I think I'm going to, the ones that have already rooted, and in fact this one has already started putting out growth, I might put these ones into, I want to say sphagnum moss, again, just because that's how I typically do it. So I'm just going to grab a little container for them. Yeah, and for the time being, I think I'm just going to pop those two together, and I can always divide them further down the line if I want to. And then I think I'll probably make a little prop box for the unsprouted corms. But yeah, no, as I was saying, for that reason, because I've had eyes on my Instagram a little bit more, I'm guessing there's probably some new viewers here as well, and if there is, hello, it's nice to meet you. Thank you for being here. And also, if you are interested to see my snippet from Gardener's World, I have put it on my Patreon, so you don't have to be a paid member to go and watch it if you fancy watching it. And if you don't, then that is okay as well. But what I thought I would probably do after I've done this is I thought I might just show you the plants that I showed on Gardener's World and show you what they look like now, because as I say, it's been 10 months since we filmed it, and 10 months is a pretty long time when you're thinking about plants, particularly considering we are just coming into growing season. The growth that I've had in my plants since then has been pretty insane. So yeah, I'm gonna just pop these up and then I'll do a little side-by-side comparison so you can see what they look like now. Perfect. So what I've done for these two little corms that are starting to sprout, I don't know how well you'd be able to see on camera actually, but I've just left their little heads sticking out, and I've planted the corms themselves down into the sphagnum moss. And again, similarly to what I just said about the other one in sphagnum moss, I will just rehydrate the little bottom layer as and when to keep this hydrated. Probably put this in my cabinet, or perhaps cover it in cling film or put a little lid on it and leave it by a window just to help get them going. In fact, I think I might do that. I think I probably will. And then with the ones that haven't sprouted yet, they have quite a few of them have got quite a lot of brown on them. I never know what it's called. I guess it's just like the brown outer skin, outer shell. You can kind of peel it off. And it's a good idea, if possible, to just peel a little bit of it off, as much as you possibly can, just because, again, this can make them more susceptible to rotting. You don't need to get all of it off. Very similar to transferring to semi-hydro. But then there's quite a few different ways that I propagate alocasia corms, and to be honest, I've kind of gone back to sphagnum moss over these last few months. I was doing the shallow water method for a very long time, and I am still doing that for some of my alocasias. But I think I might just make a very small little sphagnum moss prop box and pop them all in. I don't see any reason why that wouldn't work. So yeah, as I say, I haven't got all of it off, but I've just got as much as I can easily pull off. You don't want to start like picking away at the corm too much and breaking it or damaging it, because again, that can also make it more susceptible to rotting. So I feel like this is the best way forward. So again, little layer of sphagnum moss, and then I'm just going to lay these on top. Some of them I can kind of stick down a little bit into it with the tops poking out. And if you're not quite sure which is the top, the bottom is usually one that's got the little tail. They don't all have that, but yeah, the top is usually a little bit more bulbous, if that's the right word. But to be honest, if you're not sure and you just lay them on their sides, that is usually okay as well. Fab. And then, like I just said for the other one, what I'll do is I'll just cover this with cling film and I'll put it by my window. All alocasia corms really need in order to sprout is just warmth, light and humidity. So yeah, I've just literally cover mine in cling film, put them by my window, and 99% of the time they do well. Occasionally they'll rot. There's not a lot you can do to stop that apart from just monitoring them. But yeah, that's my plan for those ones, and hopefully I will have lots of babies of this plant soon. So that's all the rehabbing that I wanted to do. And as I say, I'm just kind of excited actually to show you some growth updates from Gardener's World to now. And I'm going to start with my Monstera dubia because, oh my goodness, if you've only seen it on Gardener's World, I feel like you're going to get a shock. I will turn the camera around and I will show you what she looks like now. Look how crazy that is. It is such an insane amount of growth for less than a year. And like the growth she's putting out now is just ginormous, absolutely huge. Honestly, I could not be prouder of this plant. I'm gonna have to chop her at some point soon because as you can see, she's literally grown off the moss pole. And I don't wanna have to do it, but at the same time, I can then start sharing this plant a little bit more and passing it on to some other people that want her. But yeah, I think she's just stunning. And then another one that I showed on Gardener's World was my Aglaonema cutlass. It still lives in that same position on my kitchen side. And as you can see, that is what it was looking like then, which was 10 months ago. And to be honest, I have cut this plant back several times. It does get very bushy very quickly. And because I keep it in my kitchen, it does just need a trim from time to time. But it is, I think it's looking pretty good. She's obviously sized up a little bit, considering she's had, in fact, I was gonna say not just a chop back, but I have also divided this plant. I've kind of divided and propagated this plant a couple of times. I think she's doing pretty well. And I would still 100% stand by what I said on Gardener's World. I think this is such a great beginner plant. It's so easy. I do very little to it and I just think it is beautiful. And this is what my alocasia Jacqueline was looking like in May last year. As you can see, I was growing her in my cabinet at the time. And nowadays, just take a look, she would not fit in my cabinet. This plant is absolutely ginormous. In fact, she barely fits on the shelf that I'm growing her on here. And her leaves are, again, just huge. It's such a beautiful plant, this one. I love this type of alocasia. But oh my God, has she grown. I wasn't really aware of exactly how much this plant had grown until I looked back and saw that clip. But yeah, she's magnificent. She's a beast. So yeah, I think those are all the updates I'm going to do for today's video. I did have a few more that I wanted to take you through, but I'm kind of thinking maybe they deserve their own video, so I will probably be doing that in the next few days. But yeah, I will keep you updated on these rehab plants and I will let you know how they get on. I also really hope if you were doing planty stuff along with this video, you got lots done. And yeah, if you enjoyed it, please make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, have a lovely day, and I will see you in the next video.
Stay sexy, plant lovers.